From the outside looking in, it may seem like I've done pretty well in life. I did well at the O-level and IB examinations. I received very generous financial aid throughout my schooling life. I founded and led multiple organizations. I've won national awards, and I even managed to graduate from my dream school, Yale University. But I list these accomplishments not to flaunt what I've been so lucky to achieve, but to show you guys that yes, I have had the taste of success, or at least the way it is conventionally defined. And yet I sit before you here, a fresh year graduate, barely a month out of school, with such different views of what success means to me, at least compared to my 14-year-old self who wanted everything that I have today. So in today's video, we're going to be diving deeper into that. I'm going to share with you how I went from someone who was the bottom of my class to the top of my grade, how that process really influenced the way that I saw success, and how my views have changed since then. I'm going to talk about the way that I think success is intertwined with privilege, social expectation, and of course, the thing that we're all searching for, happiness. But in order for me to get into all of that, I think we need to start from the very beginning with chapter 1, how it all began. I grew up in a system that very much prioritized and rewarded success, and that is something that I learned very quickly as a child. This is 11-year-old me. I spent most of my time secretly watching anime and playing computer games that I could find for free online. I felt out of my depth in class. I found absolutely no motivation to study because I was so demoralized by how smart everyone around me seemed, and I thought there was no point putting in effort since I was going to do worse than all of them anyway. It got to a point when even my grandmother was so worried that she wrote me a letter telling me that I had to study hard and do all my exams or else I wouldn't be able to get a degree. Obviously, a lot had happened before this in order to get up to this point, but I think this letter goes to show that there were many people around me who were very worried about where I was at that point in my life. By this point, I had quit all my extracurriculars, from piano to ballet to drama and softball, all these things that I was actually good at and enjoying, partly because I felt like there was no point in putting in effort if I couldn't be the best, and partly because I felt pressure to put aside even more time for studying since I clearly wasn't doing very well in school. In sum, I was pimply, insecure, unconfident, and frustrated at both myself and the world. It felt like I was never enough, pretty enough, smart enough, hardworking enough. I just felt like a disappointment. Let's fast forward 4 years. This is 15-year-old me. Now she is miles away from the girl that I was when I was 11. My grades consistently put me at the top 10 to 15 of my grade, and I was the section leader of the soprano twos in the school choir. Life was good, at least better than it was when I was 11, but I also had some pretty toxic mindsets back in the day. I had lost my carefree spirit of my younger years. I would come straight home after school, never hang out with friends or go out. I would exercise and maybe work all the way till dinner, have a walk with my mom, and then work all the way till nighttime again. I was so proud of the fact that my entire life revolved around my studies and choir. I broke down often from the stress of school, and even though my mom was there to tell me to just try my best and take it easy, I was really hard on myself about my results. I very much believed that I had to work myself to the ground in order to get into a good school and a good job in the future. And I wore the amount of work that I did as a badge of honor. And it definitely helped that I always heard praises from those around me about how hard I had worked. Yes, I was focused, driven, disciplined, perseverant, and productive. And I'm very proud of my 15-year-old self for coming so far since primary school. But I was also extremely competitive, results-oriented, and sometimes way too hard on myself for my own good. In this phase of my life, I truly was a product of the education system that I grew up within here in Singapore. In primary school, I felt like there was no point working hard because I wasn't going to do well anyway. I didn't treasure my extracurriculars because I didn't learn to enjoy the process of just learning a new skill for the sake of it, and instead saw it as something that I had to prove my worth in yet again. I had a very fixed mindset that I was the kind of person who was never going to be good enough, who was never going to see success, and so I gave up on even trying. In secondary school, I managed to break out of this fixed mindset and actually realized that if I put in hard work, I could get to better places. I went from a nobody to a somebody who felt like her life was worth something. But the thing is, a lot of that self-worth came from what I could achieve outside of myself, came from my good grades, to my leadership positions, to even the way that I looked. I relished in the praise I was hearing from those around me about my transformation, and understandably so. I had worked hard to get there, but I was also so fearful of losing control over my perfectly curated life. Although on the outside, my 11-year-old and 15-year-old selves seemed so different, they really had such similar views on success. They both saw success as things that we achieve, on accomplishments, on the outcomes rather than the process. Chapter 2: How it gradually started to change. I did well enough at my O-levels to go to any junior college that I wanted to. It was at this point, with university and college seeming so close on the horizon, that I started asking myself more existential questions like, what comes next? Why am I working so hard? And what am I working towards? All my life, I think there was this implicit assumption from those around me that good grades meant a career as a doctor or lawyer. And multiple times in my childhood, had it been insinuated that going to law would be a good profession for me in the future. And I had never questioned any of that, at least up until this point. This was when I started asking myself, what do I want? What is my passion and my purpose? And I share a little bit of that process in another video that I did over here. It was a really gradual journey, but I eventually found out that environmental work feels the most meaningful to me, and that was when I started doing a deep dive into what schools offered environmental studies programs. And that was actually the first time that I started considering going to the US to study. The good news is that I found a lot of schools offering environmental studies programs that I would have liked to take in the US, but the bad news was a lot of them were obscure, small liberal arts schools that I had never heard of before, and neither had my family, nor I was sure most Singaporean employers as well. Immediately, all the questions started going through my head. Would I be throwing away all my hard work if I went to a school that nobody recognized? How would this affect my future job prospects? And what would my family say? As you can see, at this stage of my life, my views on what I wanted my future to look like was slowly starting to change. I felt invigorated by environmental work, and I wanted to do that, which was really a contrast to what I had held to be an ideal career for the most of my life. I was still working really hard in school, but I wasn't running the rat race for the sake of it. I had a vision, I had a purpose, and I was working hard so that I could get where I wanted to be. But I was clearly not immune to external stresses. When I shared my dreams, which diverged from the norm, I felt the weight of my family's and society's expectations weighing heavily down upon me. My family never pushed me too hard and never explicitly told me or disapproved of my decisions, but I overheard conversations and I also received many subtle hints that I was making the wrong choice, at least in their opinions. I felt like if I made the wrong move, I could genuinely become a disappointment yet again, not just to them, but to myself. And this was when I started feeling a genuine fear and uncertainty, thinking that maybe taking the path less traveled wasn't for me. And that was when I decided on a compromise. I was going to try my darn hardest to get into a great school and get full financial aid so that I could prove to everyone, including myself, that maybe following my passion wasn't a bad idea. And that is exactly what I did. Chapter 3: How college redefined my thoughts on success. In college, I had many classes, conversations, and life experiences that have shaped the way that I looked at success. And let me share some of those ways that my thoughts on success has changed. My eyes have been opened to how the capitalist world that we live in has molded us to think that success is having more, being more and wanting more. And I've seen that manifest in many forms, from the mental health crises among students, both at Yale and in Singapore, because of the drive for academic excellence, to climate change and all the environmental degradation we see today, which is greatly caused by the plundering of Earth's natural resources to fuel our constant drive for economic growth and consumerism. Being aware of this system has given me a greater ability to identify its traps and try and avoid them. I know now that buying more things or getting the most prestigious job or internship aren't going to be the things that determine my happiness, not if I don't let it. And I've learned that as long as we continue living in this world that emphasizes that we should always have more or want to be more, we will always feel things like comparison, imposter syndrome, and being inadequate in some form or another. And it takes so much self-care, inner work, and self-awareness to prevent those things from consuming us. Over time, I've come to realize that a meaningful life to me is so much more about the journey, about the process, than the outcomes. Those of you who have been on this channel for a while might know that I've experienced many things throughout college, from heartbreak to solo travel to living on my own for the first time to leading multiple organizations. And it is these experiences that have made me who I am. Not my grades, not the school that I got into. And yes, those things are important to a certain extent for me to be able to be where I am today, but just having those things are not enough for me to actually feel fulfilled. Now, for me, success is about growth, about my values, about my mindset. It's about doing the things that make me feel fulfilled. It's about how every single time I've cried or I've fallen down or I've gotten off track, I've managed to bounce back a stronger person. It's about feeling good about who I am and about who I'm becoming. And that's why I think it really felt like my life truly only started after I came to college. The 18 years I spent prior were about learning the ropes of life, were about learning how to function or even do well in our society, in the system that we live in. But it wasn't a life that I chose for myself. In college, I was able to do that more freely. I was able to dictate and steer and determine the path of my life. Some of you may be thinking, well, you got into Yale, so obviously your experience was good. And that's when I want to say it's not true. I've done a previous video on my disappointing first year at Yale and how I really learned at that time that although your environment does influence your level of fulfillment and happiness, ultimately it is up to you to determine how satisfied you feel with life. And also, me getting into Yale was largely based on luck. After reading my admissions file and getting to know a lot of people who were rejected from Yale, even though they were just as, if not even more accomplished than I was at the time of application, I realized that I got in not only because of my application itself, but also because of the school that I came from and my specific set of interests. There was really very little way for me to predict how and whether I would have gotten into Yale or any other school that I applied to. And so I realized that if I based all my happiness on things that I cannot control, things outside of myself, then I will always be a slave to my external environment, and that is not something that I want. College was also the time I started learning so much more about the examples of success outside of a typical 9 to 5. I learned about the YouTubers and content creators who are making a career out of doing something that they love. I learned about the financial independence, retire early, or the FIRE movement, which really helped me to rethink what retirement means and prioritize financial independence. I learned about the numerous indigenous and eco-villages where people may not be the most materially rich but are far more emotionally and socially rich than many other places in the world. I learned about ground-up initiatives and communities that have championed social political change in their own unique ways. And if all these things aren't expressions of success in their own way, then I don't know what is. And because of this, I now refuse to define success as only something that you reach if you've achieved X amount of money or followers or accomplishments. Instead, to me, it is really something that you can choose to define for yourself. Finally, I want to emphasize the way that we view success and whether we are able to achieve it is so deeply intertwined with privilege. I can say a lot of these things I've said in this video because I am a Yale graduate and I acknowledge that this degree comes with so many advantages. I can sit here and say that success is about the journey and not the destination because I have enough materially and financially to make it such that I don't have to get the most high-paying job in order to support myself or my loved ones. I understand all of this, and learning this over the course of these couple of years has really made me question the system that we live in that prioritizes and advantages some of us over others. But this is a whole other topic that I will dedicate a future video to, so definitely stay tuned for that. In sum, I've learned that the definition of success is far more nuanced than we have been taught to believe. It is not striving towards accomplishments blindly or with a one-track mind, but being really intentional about what we care about and what fills our cup. And since that looks different for everyone, we need to find out what our own values are and what fulfillment looks like for us in our own unique way. I would love to hear from you in the comments below if you have any thoughts on this as well. Although this video is a little bit long, I hope that it's given you a little bit more insight into how you define success in your own life. It is my greatest wish that we all spend a little more time reflecting on the things that truly bring us joy and the intentions behind the things that we do. And with that, I'm signing off and I'll see you guys for next week's video. Bye.